40 years in the spotlight. Over 3 million records sold worldwide. 5 studio albums that redefined rock. 3 deaths that nearly destroyed her. And 1 photograph that changed music forever. This is Patti Smith, the godmother of punk. In 1975, when disco ruled the airwaves, a 28-year-old poet from New Jersey walked into Electric Lady Studios with just $13,000, a notebook full of poetry, and a dream. 3 weeks later, she released Horses, a record so raw and fearless that Rolling Stone ranked it #44 among the 500 greatest albums of all time. Critics called it a revolution. Religious groups called it blasphemy. On its cover, shot by her best friend and lover, photographer Robert Mapplethorpe, she appeared androgynous, defiant, almost divine. No makeup, no artifice, just truth. That single image became one of the most powerful symbols of female rebellion in modern history. But fame came at a price. In 1977, during a live concert in Tampa, she fell 15 feet from the stage, fracturing her spine. Doctors warned she might never walk again. Yet within months, she was back recording Easter, 1978, which featured Because the Night, co-written with Bruce Springsteen, selling over 1 million copies and peaking at #3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Then came the losses. Mapplethorpe's death from AIDS in 1989. Her husband, Fred Sonic Smith, dead from heart failure in 1994. Her brother Todd, gone just months later. Within 5 years, her entire world collapsed. For nearly a decade, she disappeared, living quietly in Detroit, raising her children, haunted by ghosts. But in 1996, she returned with Gone Again, an album born from grief and resurrection. Its lead single, People Have the Power, became an anthem for change, played at protests, political rallies, and even at the United Nations. Behind every photograph lies another truth. A woman who faced death, loss, and exile, and turned it into poetry. This is the untold story of Patti Smith, the woman who transformed pain into art and rebellion into something sacred. Before the fame, before the fire, there was silence. Patti Smith was born in Chicago, 1946, the daughter of a factory worker and a waitress who once dreamed of being a jazz singer. Her family moved constantly, chasing factory jobs across the industrial towns of New Jersey. Poverty was not a phase, it was the air she breathed. At age 7, she nearly died of diphtheria. Weeks in isolation, fever hallucinations. It was there, she said, she first saw visions, flashes of light and poetry she could not explain. Religion became both her comfort and her cage. Her mother taught her to pray. Her father taught her to question everything. In high school, she was the strange girl, tall, awkward, reciting Rimbaud instead of Elvis. She drew angels in her notebooks and dreamed of Paris, of art, of escape. But life had other plans. At 19, she gave birth to a child out of wedlock and gave the baby up for adoption. It was a wound that would follow her forever. The first of many sacrifices she would make in the name of art. In her own words, "I had nothing, only faith, poetry, and the need to be free." When poetry met punk. In the spring of 1967, Patti Smith arrived in New York City with $32 in her pocket and a suitcase full of books. She had nowhere to sleep. Sometimes she spent the night on park benches, clutching Rimbaud's poems like a Bible. The city was burning with youth, art, and chaos, and she was about to become its most unlikely prophet. She found work at a Manhattan bookstore and soon met a young photographer, Robert Mapplethorpe, at Pratt Institute. They were both broke, hungry, and fearless. They moved into room 1017 of the Chelsea Hotel, the same corridors once haunted by Janis Joplin, Bob Dylan, and Jimi Hendrix. That small, decaying room would become the birthplace of a revolution. Mapplethorpe urged her to perform her poems aloud. In 1971, she took the stage at St. Mark's Church with guitarist Lenny Kaye blending poetry with electric feedback. That night marked the first ever punk poetry performance in America. By 1974, she formed the Patti Smith Group with Kaye, J.D. Daugherty, Ivan Krall, and Richard Soule. They rehearsed in abandoned lofts, recorded demos on secondhand tape. Her words were messy, sacred, angry, and magnetic. When Arista Records offered her a contract, she signed it with a line from her favorite poet, "I am an American artist, and I have no guilt." Then came Horses, 1975. Recorded at Electric Lady Studios, the same room where Jimi Hendrix once worked, the album cost just $13,000 to produce. Released on the 10th of November, 1975, it stunned the world. The opening line, "Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine," was like an earthquake. Rolling Stone ranked it #44 on their 500 greatest albums of all time. Pitchfork later called it the Big Bang of Punk. Horses sold over 1.5 million copies worldwide, unprecedented for a debut punk record led by a woman. In Britain, critics compared her to Bob Dylan. In America, to Joan of Arc. Her androgynous cover photo, shot by Mapplethorpe, was declared the most important rock portrait ever taken by Time magazine. That single image, unretouched, unsmiling, broke every rule of female beauty in the 1,970 seconds. But Patti was never interested in beauty. She was after truth. In 1976, she released Radio Ethiopia, louder, darker, experimental. It didn't chart as high, but its rawness made her a cult hero. The following year, during a concert in Tampa, Florida, tragedy struck. Mid-performance, she stepped backward, tripped on a stage monitor, and fell over 15 feet. She fractured her neck in 2 places and required 32 stitches. Doctors warned she might never perform again. She spent months in rehabilitation. In her diary, she wrote, "I fell from grace, but maybe I fell into myself." By 1978, she returned stronger with Easter, a mix of spiritual anger and rock fervor. The album's lead single, "Because the Night," co-written with Bruce Springsteen, became a worldwide hit. It reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100, selling over 1 million singles and propelling Easter to #20 on the Billboard 200. Critics hailed it as the moment punk became poetry. That same year, she graced the cover of Rolling Stone, the first woman of punk ever to do so. Her concerts at CBGB and Central Park drew over 30,000 fans, an unimaginable number for a punk artist. The New York Times called her a national treasure disguised as a rebel. But fame was a double-edged sword. The underground saw her as their voice. The mainstream saw her as a threat. When she declared on stage, "We created it, now we can destroy it," tabloids labeled her the high priestess of chaos. Still, she never backed down. In 1979, she released Wave, her 4th album, produced by Todd Rundgren. The single Frederick, a love song for her future husband, Fred Sonic Smith of MC5, hinted that she was ready to step away. The record reached number 18 inches the UK, and Melody Maker named it one of the year's best albums. Then, suddenly she vanished. At the height of her fame, Patti Smith walked away. No farewell tour. No press release. She married Fred Smith in 1980, moved to Detroit, and raised 2 children. She traded microphones for motherhood. For nearly a decade, the woman who defined punk disappeared from the public eye. The 1,980 seconds moved on without her MTV, Madonna, glam rock, new wave. But her shadow lingered. Artists from U2, REM, Nirvana, and PJ Harvey cited her as their muse. Even Michael Stipe once said, "Without Patti Smith, there would be no me." In 1988, after 8 years of silence, she returned with Dream of Life. It included the song People Have the Power, co-written with Fred Smith, a spiritual anthem that would later echo across protests from Occupy Wall Street to climate marches decades later. Though the album peaked only at #49 on the Billboard 200, it signaled something greater than chart success, the rebirth of an artist who refused to die. By then, she had lived through poverty, pain, and transcendence, and she had only begun to understand what loss really meant. 1,989 1,995. By the end of the 1,980 seconds, Patti Smith had everything the underground once denied her: respect, stability, family. She lived quietly in Street Clair Shores, Michigan, far from New York's chaos. No journalists, no cameras, no flashing lights. She was 42 years old, a wife, a mother of two, and she believed the war was finally over. But in 1989, the phone rang. It was the call that would destroy the calm she had built. Her best friend and artistic twin, Robert Mapplethorpe, was dying. AIDS, the epidemic that had already taken more than 60,000 lives in America by that year. He was only 42 years old. Patti flew to New York, holding his hand through the final weeks. When he died on the 9th of March 1989, the art world mourned, but for Patti, the loss was personal, cosmic, and permanent. When Robert died, she said, "I lost my reflection." His final gift to her was a book, Just Kids, a promise that someday she would tell their story. After his funeral, Patti returned to Detroit. She recorded nothing. For 6 years, there was silence. The punk poet who once screamed, "Jesus died for somebody's sins but not mine," had vanished into domestic shadows. But the silence was not peace. It was the sound of the storm that was coming. In 1994, death knocked again. Her husband, Fred "Sonic" Smith, suffered a sudden heart attack in their Michigan home. He was 45 years old. Fred wasn't just her husband, he was her anchor, her musical partner, her world. He had been part of the MC5, the Detroit band that once sold over 500,000 records in the late 60 seconds and defined proto-punk. Together they had written "People Have the Power," a song that would outlive them both. Now he was gone. Just 6 weeks later, her younger brother Todd Smith, who had helped her raise her children after Fred's death, collapsed and died of a stroke. 2 deaths. 6 weeks. The same house. The news barely made the papers a few lines in the Detroit Free Press. But for Patti, the world stopped spinning. She spent the next year in mourning, wearing black every day, refusing interviews, avoiding photographs. Friends said she moved like a ghost. In her journals, she wrote, "I was an orphan again. God took everything, my mirror, my mate, my blood." Between 1,989 and 1,995, the world around her kept changing. Kurt Cobain rose and fell. MTV crowned new icons. The punk she had birthed became commercialized, sold in malls and on magazine covers. In 1994, Rolling Stone listed Horses among the most influential albums in rock history. But Patti didn't even know. She wasn't reading. She wasn't listening. Her Detroit home became her monastery. She handwrote prayers on paper scraps. She stopped dyeing her hair. The black turned gray, then silver. Every morning, she read the same line from the Bible. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." She waited for comfort. It never came. Then, in the winter of 1,995, something shifted. Her friend, musician Michael Stipe of REM, visited her in Detroit. He had sold more than 50 million records by then and told her, "You gave us the courage to speak. Now you have to speak again." Another friend, Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet who had once shared the stage with her, sent her a postcard that simply read, "Rise, sister." And slowly, she did. She began writing again, not for fame, but to survive. her notebooks filled with memories of Mapplethorpe, Fred, and Todd. She said, "I wrote to keep them alive." When she stepped into the studio in 1996, after nearly a decade of silence, she recorded Gone Again. It was not a comeback, it was a resurrection. The album featured songs like About a Boy, a tribute to Kurt Cobain, who died in 1994, and Farewell Real, written for Fred. Critics called it a requiem disguised as a rock record. It debuted at #54 on the Billboard 200, modest in numbers, massive in meaning. The Los Angeles Times wrote, "No other artist of her generation has turned grief into grace so completely." Gone Again sold over 250,000 copies worldwide, small compared to her earlier work, but it reintroduced Patti Smith to a generation that had never seen her. That same year, she embarked on her first tour since 1979, performing in front of over 100,000 fans across Europe. Every show began the same way. A photo of Mapplethorpe projected on the screen, a single candle burning beside her mic, and Patti whispering, "For those who left and those who remain." By 1997, her name was once again in headlines, but this time, not for controversy, not for rebellion, but for survival. She had become what she once feared most, a legend. Her poems were taught in universities. People Have the Power was used in political rallies across 12 countries. In France, she received the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres, the nation's highest honor for artists. In Japan, a concert broadcast in Tokyo drew over 20 million viewers. The woman who once fell from a stage now stood taller than ever, but she carried her ghosts with her. In an interview with Mojo magazine in 1998, she said, "When I sing, they sing through me. I am never alone." Those 6 years, 1989 to 1995, remain the black hole of her life. 3 deaths, 1 silence, 1 rebirth. They turned the poet into a prophet, and the singer into something far more eternal. Her private photos from that era, eyes sunken, cigarette in hand, children in the background, reveal not a rock star, but a mother of grief. Every wrinkle on her face is a verse. Every silence between words is a prayer. And when she finally returned to the light, she did not come back for fame, but for faith. When Patti Smith returned in 1996, she wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing faith. Her album Gone Again sold over 250,000 copies and was hailed by Rolling Stone as a masterpiece of mourning. It ranked among the top 10 albums of 1996 by the New York Times, and for the first time in years, Patti smiled on stage. But it wasn't joy, it was acceptance. She followed it with Peace and Noise, 1997, and Gung Ho 2000, earning 2 Grammy nominations for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance. Her tours across Europe and Asia drew over 400,000 fans between 1996 and 2002, proof that the world still listened to the woman who once fell from grace. In 2005, she released Trampin', a tribute to motherhood and resilience, featuring her daughter Jessie on piano. By 2007, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, standing among Dylan, the Rolling Stones, and the Doors, all of whom had once inspired her. That same year, Horses was reissued and sold an additional 500,000 copies, pushing its total to more than 2 million worldwide. But her greatest triumph wasn't on stage. It was in words. In 2010, her memoir Just Kids, a promise she made to Robert Mapplethorpe 20 years earlier, was published. The book became an international bestseller, translated into 40 languages, and won the National Book Award for nonfiction. Sales surpassed 1.2 million copies, and critics called it a love letter to art, loss, and the courage to begin again. Then, in December 2016, history witnessed a moment that defined her humanity. At the Nobel Prize ceremony in Stockholm, she performed A Hard Rain's A Gonna Fall in honor of Bob Dylan, the man who inspired her to write. Midway through the song, overwhelmed with emotion, she forgot the lyrics. She stopped, apologized to the King of Sweden, and began again. The audience gave her a standing ovation lasting 2 minutes and 40 seconds. That moment, vulnerable, real, imperfect, went viral, viewed over 30 million times online. Since then, Patti has become something beyond music. She's an activist, a poet laureate of pain and hope. Her anthem, "People Have the Power," was used by Greenpeace, Amnesty International, and the 2017 Women's March, played in over 50 cities worldwide. Even now, in her late 70s, she still tours small theaters, candlelit stages, sometimes reading Rimbaud between songs. In 2022, she performed at the Vatican before Pope Francis. In 2023, Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Her message remains unchanged. We are free, we are human, and we have the power to change the world. From the smoke-filled clubs of New York to the grand halls of Stockholm, Patti Smith turned every scar into a sermon, every loss into light. The photos may be private, the story may be untold, but her legacy is eternal.